Hello, everyone, and welcome to Godspeed today. Happy Wednesday. I hope you guys had a beautiful trading day today. Super excited to share what I have. I've been writing about this whole AI-infused paradigm shift, industrial revolution, Renaissance period, whatever you want to call it. I have some fun charts to share, and I'm excited to get into it. So let's go ahead and get started. A few weeks back, JC and I were in New Orleans, and we were chatting about all these names. We were chatting about how we're kind of putting the puzzle pieces together here. And, I asked the question, well, what would George Jetson's NASDAQ 100 look like? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to kind of look at the themes that would be within George Jetson's NASDAQ 100. And then we'll go into some individual companies and some charts. It is too early to predict all the winners. I don't have a crystal ball here in front of me, but based on these trends, we can make some assumptions. So here are the Jetsons themes. We got AI, robots, content, flying cars, food delivery, nuclear reactors, space real estate, kind of a joke, but I don't think so, space rock miners, battery technology, quantum computers, autonomous mobility, commerce and logistics, and satellite communications. So these, in my mind, are the broad themes that if George Jetson had a NASDAQ 100, would dominate that portfolio. First name up is Tesla. And I talked about Tesla in a post yesterday being the best performing Magnificent Seven name since the April 8th low, up about 62, 63%, somewhere in that region. And it makes sense. Elon's EV maker is not just a car company. Tesla is well positioned for this new autonomous future. And we can see it here. We have humanoids, autonomous mobility. Elon talked about bringing the robo-taxis out in Austin before the end of June. He only said there's going to be about 10 of them, but still, we just need to start seeing that momentum there. And then there's these Tesla semis that we haven't seen just quite yet. But going into a chart of Tesla, this is our daily chart. Got a nice little consolidation period after this bottom. And like I said, Tesla was the best performing Magnificent Seven name coming off those April lows. I'm a big fan of winners win, losers average losers. So I'm not trying to play the catch-up trades. I'm just trying to buy the leaders. And based off the relative strength from the lows, Tesla is a leader. And if we look at this long-term monthly chart, we haven't even broken out of this base from 2021. And I know JC talks a lot about Tesla and Elon creating the most shareholder value of all time during this epic run-up from, what was it, like end of 2019 through the beginning of 21, end of 22. Not to say we're going to have a perfectly measured move there, but I expect this underlying trend to resolve higher. Kind of the next behemoth of the bunch is Google. And you're going to notice some of these first few names I'm talking about are the big cap boys, because we live in a market cap world and the big just keep getting bigger. They have capital to deploy into AI initiatives. They're spending money on AI. They're spending money on nuclear reactors to then power the AI. We want to be focused on big cap tech. So we got Google. Last week they made a bunch of announcements talking about their VO3, making videos in minutes, AI search. Google also has this dark horse called Waymo, which if you're unfamiliar, I've been writing about it for some time, but Waymos are crawling all over the place down in Phoenix. They're in Austin. They're hitting the roads in Atlanta, mapping out DC, mapping out Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco. So the Waymos are starting to permeate into the market. And then the other, maybe we call it a stepchild, I don't even know, but YouTube. YouTube's revenue is more than Netflix. And so it's just hard to ignore Google as this giant. I know the kind of the Magnificent Seven big cap tech names haven't been as in play as of late. We're seeing a lot of the nuclear names pop off. We're seeing the rocket names pop off. Joby was up another, like 30% today. So we're seeing some of the more speculative names in this paradigm shift coming to light. But I really think these big cap techs are going to start playing first position, taking that pole position and leading the way. So here's that chart of Google, weekly chart. You can see we're still stuck in a range. Nothing to call home about. But if the underlying trend is any indication of where this stock is going, my thoughts are up and to the right. Meta. Now, Meta has, 3.3 billion daily active users around the world across all of its platforms. So this company touches half of the entire population of Earth. They have the Meta Ray-Ban sunglasses, which I gotta say, I bought a pair. The camera quality is not as sharp as I would like it to be, but like I can answer phone calls, I can listen to music. It's much better than having to wear headphones. You know, if I go run, I don't have to worry about the cords dangling or anything like that. And I'm just waiting for the day for some sort of, you know, little AR, VR interface on these glasses. I mean, the first use case that comes to mind for me is on the putting green. I want that tiger vision on the putting green when I wear these glasses. And I don't think something like that is that too far away. Looking at this chart of Meta, looks a lot like some of the other Magnificent Seven names. You know, Apple's the outlier. I talked about that yesterday. I'm not featuring Apple in this presentation here today, but nice cup. We're kind of working on the handle as we speak. And again, if its previous trend is any indication of where this name is going, my bet is up and to the right. Microsoft, you know, the enterprise AI powerhouse. We all know Microsoft dominates the enterprise space, and you know, they have their own little monopoly there. I've worked for different companies where we're only allowed to use Microsoft products. We have to stick to Teams, we have to stick to Outlook, we have to stick to Excel. And yeah, maybe their products aren't the most superior on the market, but they work, they do the job. And you know, once they get a customer, they don't relinquish them. So Microsoft infusing Copilot into its entire suite of Office products is really, really compelling. And this chart kind of shares that story. This is a monthly chart of Microsoft, and check out this breakaway gap we had. I don't think we see too many breakaway gaps on the monthlies too often. So my belief is this chart is going to continue up and to the right. Again, we're going from the bottom left to the bottom right. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And you know, for a while there, Microsoft was a little bit of a sleeper. It was a little bit of a dark horse, consolidating in this sideways pattern for like the last 12, 14-ish months, you know, and then in their latest earnings report, they're talking about the strength of cloud. They're talking about the strength of AI, and the stock absolutely rips. So big story there to watch with Microsoft. Nvidia. Now, Nvidia is reporting earnings after the close. I haven't checked to see if the numbers dropped. Let me take a quick look and see at the tape if there's any big reactions, because like I shared in my blog post yesterday, I'm not as concerned about the numbers themselves as I am to the market's reaction to the numbers. We can go into that a little bit, but it really looks, you know, Nvidia is up, what is it, 40 basis points after the close. Let's just call that unchanged for simplicity's sake. But this chart, you know, looks a lot like the Microsoft, looks a lot like the Google. This thing is on the verge of all-time highs, pressing against those former highs. And this earnings report may be a catalyst, maybe not. But again, I'm not going to be betting against a reversal in this underlying trend. This chart is literally going from the bottom left to the top right, and I think that's going to continue. Another staple within the Jetsons economy is going to be cybersecurity. If we're living in this ever evolving digital world, cybersecurity is essential. And I pulled some little blog posts from CrowdStrike here, just the headline, so you could see the evolving role of AI in data protection. That was in January of this year. CrowdStrike research, securing AI-generated code with multiple self-learning AI agents. That was in April. CrowdStrike secures AI development with Nvidia. Once again, that was in April. So this company is integrating AI. And if you didn't see Josh Brown's interview with the CrowdStrike CEO, I highly recommend it. Great job kind of displaying and breaking down how the company is using AI to make its cybersecurity initiatives more efficient. And then let's take a look at the chart. And you know, the charts are speaking for themselves, folks. CrowdStrike, all-time high yesterday. Today, a little bit dovish action. But once again, we're looking at the general trend of that chart from the bottom left to the top right. So Amazon. Now, Amazon's not going away. In my mind, the Amazon 2-day delivery, which, you know, kind of set the entire world on fire, changing how we transact, buy goods. This is only going to get stronger. You know, we're starting to see some drone delivery companies. We're seeing some, I mean, drone delivery companies as in flying drones, as well as, you know, rolling drones. Serve Robotics is a name that comes to mind. But Amazon is leaning heavily into this humanoid automation trend within its logistics and fulfillment centers. And the chart is speaking. This is a weekly chart. We had a nice little gap here on the far right end, and we've been consolidating, pairing those gains. I love it when we get two little bases interweaved with each other, the longer base, and then we get a little baby base within the bigger base. I'm a big fan of the bases on bases. Next name up, we're going to Palantir, Enterprise Data Intelligence. And, I know Palantir has had an epic run this year, absolutely epic run this year. I'm not going to be one to call a top in Palantir. Unless things really start getting shaky, I think this trend continues. You could see we're working on our second consecutive inside week on Palantir. Super tight action, flagging right at the all-time highs. We saw it in their latest earnings report, what was it, 3-4-ish weeks ago? The company crushed it. Best earnings report I've probably ever seen. One can make the case, best earnings report on Wall Street in Wall Street's history. The stock gap down 10% and immediately got bought back up. So if that's any indication of investor demand for Palantir, I think that's going to lead to new highs coming soon. We're going to Uber with advanced mobility. And again, we talked about Waymo within Google, but Uber and Waymo are partnering on a lot of the different cities that Waymo is getting deployed to. And Uber also has this little dark horse with its partnership with Serve Robotics. I'm not sure if you guys have seen these little robots here, this image on the far right, but these little guys, they roll on the sidewalk. They deliver your food autonomously. You never have to talk to a human. I'm not one to say that's good or bad of not having interactive communications with humans, but you guys, we're living in the Jetsons world. You can't fight it. We got to embrace it and adapt to it. And, Uber is making the case for being in George Jetson's NASDAQ 100. Just take a look at this chart. Again, I'm sorry to keep pounding the table on you guys, but we're going from the bottom left to the top right in all of these names. Flagging at those all-time highs. It's super constructive action for the health of this long-term uptrend. Next, we're going to Duolingo. And now Duolingo is really interesting because they've really leaned into using AI to help educate. And there's a few other kind of education platform, publicly traded companies. The ones that come to mind immediately are Chinese names that, those charts don't look so hot. But Duolingo, on the other hand, this chart is absolutely screaming. And this company is really infusing AI into the learning process, helping its users learn new languages. Now, what does this mean for the longevity of Duolingo? I have no idea, because I could foresee, I put on my Ray-Ban sunglasses and I'm chatting to somebody in Tokyo and it just automatically translates to Japanese. I don't think we're that far off. Now, maybe Duolingo's data plays a big role in ushering in that new innovative technology. Maybe not. But for what they're doing as far as leaning into this AI trend, and the way this stock looks, you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. So now we're going to flying cars. And, this might be my favorite kind of subcategory within this Jetsons universe, because who doesn't want a flying car? Let's be real. We've been promised flying cars for God knows how long. We haven't seen them. Now, people in the industry would get upset with me for calling them flying cars. They're eVTOLs, stands for electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. And essentially, these things are electric helicopters, but they're superior to helicopters in a few ways. You can see there's multiple propellers there. So they have a lot of redundancy in terms of the safety of the aircraft. In a single prop helicopter, if one of those points of failure, and I think they typically say there's around 40 points of failure, 36, somewhere right in there. If one of those points of failure goes out, unfortunately, you're going to have, an accident. Now, with these eVTOLs, they have a redundancy of propellers. We could see the Joby aircraft there. They got 6 propellers. Archer aircraft there. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 propellers. I might be missing a couple there too. So these vehicles are going to be safer just for the sheer redundancy fact. They're also not quite, but for all intents and purposes, silent. I lived in Sedona for a number of months, almost 2 years. And every single day there's helicopters going around. And I'm so happy that people are getting to view the red rocks from the sky and have that experience. But personally, for me, being on the ground, I would prefer them to have these eVTOLs to where I don't hear them in the sky. We don't want to be disturbed by the birds in the air. So here's the flying car composite, and this is Joby and Archer. And both of these companies IPO'd during 2021, kind of via the SPAC craze, and you can see they haven't done anything. But we're returning to the scene of the crime. We're right at this level that marks the SPAC initial offering. We retested those levels in Q4, Q1 of 2025, broke down, and now we're back. So in my mind, third time's a charm. Off the gate, we didn't get there. Second time, we didn't get there. Now this third time, I learned from some of my mentors early on is third time's a charm. So that's kind of where my head is at. I'm betting a third time's a charm. And we got some news from Joby today. So Joby has a partnership agreement with Toyota, and Toyota is going to deploy $250 million to Joby to enhance $50 million is actually the first tranche. So if Joby continues to perform, continues to hit those key milestones that it's set with Toyota, sometime in the next 6, 12, 18 months or so, Joby may get hit with the second tranche of that $250 million for the total of $500 million. Now, one chart I've really been watching, because if you followed me for a while, I was an Archer bull pretty heavily. Once we kind of got that pop a few weeks back, I lightened the load. I still hold it, but this was the chart that I was keeping my eye on. And given today's performance, Joby, flipped back over Archer in its market cap. But this is a really, really fascinating story where these two are just neck and neck. And I can't think of anything more exciting than innovation in transportation, where we got this dogfight going on. Joby and Archer, pick your bets, place your bets. You got to bet on a horse. The prudent thing might be to bet on both of them. And then, if one of them wins, one of them, kind of stagnates, you're not missing the winner. But it's quite the race we got going on there. And then space, obviously the final frontier. Some of the space stocks have been absolutely on fire. I have this space composite here featuring RDW, Intuitive Machines, and Rocket Labs. We made an absolute monster move in Q3 and Q4 of 24. And these names got crushed. We're down, 60-ish, 70% from those highs to the lows. So these names got decimated, shaking out all the weak hands. And now they're working their way back up to those highs. Now, do I think that the space stocks are going to just go on a tear and absolutely rip and not test this 24 level again? I really don't think so. Like I was saying, third time's a charm. So we'll get this first test. I think we'll see a second test. And, fingers crossed, we'll get a nice risk reward entry as kind of that cup and handle formation. I'd be remiss not to talk about nuclear because there's a lot happening in nuclear. We can see last week, President Trump signs executive orders to usher in a nuclear renaissance, restore gold standard in science. And the nuclear names absolutely went berserk on this news. I have a new nuclears composite here. This is Oklo, SMR, and NNE. And this is a daily chart. So you can see those last 3 days, absolutely monster moves. I mean, I think NNE was up, close to 30-ish% on Friday. So we're seeing the animal spirits. And on the backs of this news, notice where this name broke out right above those Q1 2025 highs. Again, we saw this speculative thrust first occur in Q4 of last year. It fizzled, but these names are coming back. And if these names come back and they survive, the way the current administration is going, the way these trends are developing, I don't think you can ignore what's happening. Like, we're going through some sort of a paradigm shift. What it looks like in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, nobody knows. And if anybody tries to tell you they know, just smile and nod your head and be kind and, make your own thesis, because nobody knows what's about to happen. Quantum computing. Now, this is one of those, is this real life kind of moments. Quantum computing just unlocks, Like AI is a massive unlock. It's probably made me 10 times more efficient at doing what I'm doing. Helps me write, helps me, organize my ideas. I can do tasks, helps me plan date nights, helps me make sure I say the right things in the right tone of voice. It's been a huge help. Quantum computing is just another unlock. And we've seen some of the quantum stocks absolutely go off. I have this quantum composite, IonQ, D-Wave, that's the QBTS, the rigatoni, Strauss's favorite, RGTI, the Qubit, and IBM. And we threw IBM in there because, IBM is one of these legacy computer makers, and they've made some noise about quantum computing. I think it was back in 2023, they unveiled a quantum computer that they were partnering with Cleveland Cliffs Hospital to help advance medical research. Now, they don't have a ton of updates as far as how this process is going, but we saw in D-Wave's latest earnings report, they're collecting revenue. They are gaining customers, and quantum computing is not just some far off, crazy fairy tale land idea. Now, there will be animal spirits. We see this all the time in innovative trends. The market goes crazy high, crazy parabolic, and it takes some time, before the consumer and the customers can actually adopt that technology. Just think of the dot-com bubble, right? Like, what was Amazon doing when the stock ripped up to, what was it, $100 before all these splits and whatnot, and like peaked in 1999 or 2000? Like, yes, the company was delivering books, but was Amazon what it is today back in 1999? Absolutely not. So we don't totally know how these things are going to develop, but these trends are here, and these trends are here to stay. And, the quantum composite, it made a new high. Higher highs and higher lows. It's the only way to go. Let's go ahead and take a look, because I wanted to get into Nvidia's earnings if they reported yet. Let me pull up their IR page. So the stock is up, roughly 3-ish%. Not a crazy move, but first move higher is definitely what we want to see. It's trading at 138.50 and change. So we're still a few points, 15-ish points off those all-time highs. But, a move like that in a stock like Nvidia, that could happen quick. If we take a brief jaunt, I wonder if I can throw this up. Let's see. Should be able to see my screen here. Yeah, can you go ahead and throw that up for me, Gene? Gene, if you want to just give me a shot when you're ready. Oh, sorry. I should have let you know I wanted to do this before we jumped on. Beautiful. Thank you, Gene, for the assist. Much appreciated. So here we go. Nvidia announces financial results for first quarter fiscal 2026. Revenue of $44.1 billion, up 12% from Q4 and 69% from a year ago. That's some nice growth, folks. 70% growth. That is nothing to scoff at. And the stock is responding, up 3% after hours? Data center revenue up $39 billion, up 10% from Q4 and 73% from a year ago. These are absolutely astronomical growth figures, and it is well warranted that the stock is up, a couple percentage points after the close. Now, I want to make something clear. I do like watching this first reaction in the stock, but I'm not going to come to any formal conclusions about how this earnings report developed until I see the closing print tomorrow. We have a lot of action in tomorrow's session. At the open, we might see some crazy gyrations. The algo's taking over, trying to flush people out. Maybe a head fake move before it rips lower. So I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait to see those closing prints. I'm going to dive into this earnings report tonight. I'm going to listen to the conference call. I definitely suggest you do the same. Nvidia is one of these companies that is leading the charge for this paradigm shift. All these AI tools, the future AI tools, they wouldn't be possible without Nvidia's innovative solutions. I was actually talking with Dr. Phil Perlman earlier today, and I asked him the question. I was like, so Phil, you were around during the dot-com bubble. You were trading, you were in the trenches. How long did Intel have its strangle on the semiconductor space kind of during that dot-com bubble? And he was like, dude, longer than you could even imagine. Now, I'm not saying that's Nvidia's case, but we have precedent that a leader can lead for 10, 15, possibly 20 years. Nvidia still may be in the early innings. So I'm excited for tomorrow's action. It should give us a lot of feedback. Thank you so much for tuning in. I do have a blog. If you aren't subscribed already, go to godspeed.beehive.com. Be sure to subscribe. I'll be back next Wednesday, and I actually think Straz and I are jumping on Friday. I'll have to confirm the time, but we're jumping on Friday to talk about a lot of these names. We've been circling the wagon on some of these themes. I know Straza has his own viewpoints. I have my own viewpoints. Sometimes we butt heads. I know when we were in Asia, we definitely had moments where we weren't talking together. So it should be a fun, lively conversation and a good way to spend your Friday. So thank you all so much. Trade well. Be safe. Godspeed.